Now, as you know, right now I am officially a clerk, officially a working man, officially someone that has a job that kind of pays at the bookstore. And really, it's the sensation of doing something that you love and having everything that you do align with your values, and that it's the sweetest joy of all time. And I really do think this job right here, it's my dream job realized in my favorite store with my favorite people, tidying shelves full of my favorite books. And I actually have a little paragraph in here. Hang on, see if I can find it. There's a little paragraph in this book of The Learned Disguise, where at the end here, there's a description of the bookstore. I actually wrote this bookstore, this mysterious bookstore, into my own little fictional narrative here. So, first glance, it was a rather pleasant-looking bookshop. At the entryway lied a glass-paneled shelf. Within, pieces of cake, scones, and croissants. The store was quite large, as the volumes stacked atop could only be reached using a ladder. Passing browsers, picking their favorites whilst neglecting the rest. Readers at the desk, enjoying their stay together with their fuming cups. The cafe at the bookstore was quite busy, as there were three dressed in black aprons, circling around and around to fulfill the demands. The store lit mainly by the window's light, but also by orange tints of the bulbs along the shelves. In the background played Mozart, imbuing the scene with a classical charm. So that was my first impression when I walked into the store. That was one of the first times where, should I say, I truly fell in love with the store. And I just thought to myself, the store has to be in this book. The store has to be somehow incorporated into the story. And actually, it's a bit of an interesting twist within this narrative here, that the main character used to go to this street side cafe at the beginning of the story, as he was, trapped in his head, as he was like a airheaded philosopher type of guy. So that was his old life. He always went to this one street side cafe. He always been there, never missed a single day. And after he finished his cup of tea at the cafe, he'd always go to the same damn reading lounge. This day after day, day after day. And then as the central conflict happens, which I'm not going to spoil, as the central conflict happens, Arthur came out a different person. The main character, Arthur Forrest, came out a different person. And then his surrounding also began to change. And the cafe became more and more distant and more cold. And the less of a desire he had to actually go into the old cafe. He's sort of departing from his old life. And then this new place opened up, and then the old cafe closed down eventually towards the end of the book. And then he discovered this new bookstore as a symbolic departure from the old, decrepit way of life. And speaking of the bookstore, and speaking of books, let's continue what we talked about before. Reading great books, reading great classics. Classics ain't gonna read like Harry Potter. Classics ain't gonna read like Neil Gaiman. Classics ain't gonna read like James Patterson. Classics ain't gonna read like any of the things that are within the genre fiction category. So I'm not dissing genre fiction for the sake of, hey, I'm elevated up here, I read better books than everyone. But it's just that, as much as I love all of the stuff about genre fiction, one of the favorite things to do is to, right before I embark upon something like a 10-hour flight to some of the other countries out there, visiting relatives, and then flying back and forth from Australia to other places of the world, there's always that urge to grab a book. It's like a $10, $15 book at the airport, and then to read that entire thing in sort of one sitting setting, to get lost in a really great story on the plane. That was always one of my favorite things to do, and should have done more of that. I should be doing more of that in the future if I tend to travel, if I decide to travel more. But there's always something, there's always this effect of you numbing your own mind with these great, fantastical stories and with these genre fictions, as much as I love them. But I feel like they don't give you that same sort of satisfaction. They don't really give you a deeper sense of revelation. They don't exactly transform your world in any practical sense. I mean, some books, some genre fiction could do that. But after reading each genre fiction book, there's a vague sense of, yeah, that was a great story, but there's a lack of that deep, holy shit, my world just fell apart sense. There's a lack of that deep, I view the entire world differently now. There's a lack of that sort of, I appreciate my surroundings so much more now. And just general lack of that. In which I think having great stories are great, and watching a great blockbuster movie, I equate blockbuster movies with genre fiction, is great. It's great for escapism, it's great for getting you into the mood, it's great for laughing with friends. But to really get the juice out of reading, to really invest yourself into the sort of, wow, my world is falling apart and changing and shifting every single day, you have to read some of the classics. That's just what I found out. Some of the classics, they're too tough for me for now, so I shelved them. So I got this whole collection of Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time just resting on the shelf. I have Dante's Inferno after reading through 15 cantos. It's now on the shelf, and Homer's Iliad, read most of it, but it just, I don't think it's the right time for me to read that thing yet. Charles Dickens, read the entirety of Great Expectations, one of my favorites. But there are moments where books can transform your entire different worldview, can turn you into a drastically different person. But these books are difficult to read. The reason why I mentioned shelving books is because some of these books are so tough that I just have to put them away for a while and come back to it. Paradise Lost was one of those books. And I think I went way too fast the first time reading it. When I go back to Paradise Lost and Dante's Inferno, the second time around, I think I'm going to read so much slower and take more time to appreciate what the book is about. Because these books are tough. These books aren't supposed to be read like Harry Potter. They're not supposed to be read like genre fiction books. I mean, even the works of Charles Dickens, which is supposed to be like a easygoing novel type, they still require a lot of attention, a lot of diving or dipping your mind into the scene. And then you couldn't read too much at once. You couldn't really dive too deep into this book. For example, you want to read 50 pages of this thing in one sitting, that's going to take some training. Dickens is tough. Dickens is out there. But some of the other books on my shelves, they're just so tough that I have to put them away for a little while. And hopefully I train up myself to get the wisdom to tackle these books. So the nobility of reading is this. Good books are supposed to be tough. And don't expect these books to read like Harry Potter. Don't expect these books to read like any other things that you would pick up and just read. Do not try to read Aristotle's Ethics like a random run-of-the-mill street side penguin book or whatever. Some of these stories could be easy to read, but realize that the greatest of the greatest, they require effort to sink your claws into these really great reads. So if you actually sink your claws into these reads, you definitely wouldn't be disappointed. That's just from my own personal experience. Whenever I'm investing some effort, reasonable amounts of effort, if the book is not too hard, I always get back the return. I always get that revelation, and it eats away at you at the back of your mind. Over time, not immediately, but over time, the book really is going to become a part of you. How you live, how you view the world. And it's just incredible. So that's all for this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys liked it. I'll see you next week on another rambly episode.